What is going on, everybody? So I know I say this in a lot of my videos, but this definitely comes in at the top in terms of how excited I am to begin this series. As many of you who have been around this channel may agree, I truly believe this series, featuring 32 individual episodes diving deep into each NFL team, is the best content that I make each year. And this really is what I look back on and am most proud of. I say this because while the major networks spend all summer regurgitating the same, 5 or 6 storylines from the year before, they fail to really capture the entire scope of the league. And I can confidently say that no other platforms out there will offer 15 plus hours breaking down every angle of the NFL. And we're not just out here talking nonsense. I can proudly say that for the last 2 years since I've been doing this, my preseason power rankings have held up much better than what you normally get out there. And this is because I don't just look at the standings from last year and kind of copy and paste them into the next season. You know, the NFL changes from year to year, really more than any sport out there. And on this channel, we recognize that you've got players returning from injuries. You got to look at the schedules from last year. You got to look at how many close games the teams played, historical data in general, just all of this to determine who's going to find success next year in a new league framework. So, last year when we placed the consensus top 3 Jacksonville Jaguars at 23rd in my power rankings, I was consistently told that I needed to delete my YouTube channel. It also didn't go over so well in 2017 when I said that it was the Eagles at 66-1 to win the Super Bowl that was the best investment in America, and that it was nonsense to put your money on teams like the Giants, Cowboys, and Raiders, who were the hot money that year. Now, I also said that the Browns taking Baker Mayfield was a joke, so I'm not saying that I'm perfect, but needless to say, I'm really excited to see what this year holds for us, and it's always fun to go back and look at what we said heading into the last season. So anyway, I'm sorry if you're just here to hear me talk about the Dolphins. This is the first episode of the series, so just give me one more moment here to explain what these deep dives will be all about, and then we'll get right into it. So each episode, we're going to reveal the next team in my power rankings, starting at the bottom with number 32, and then we will start a brief intro, get into the roster, and review kind of how each position group ranks stacked up against the rest of the league, and really break down each team's strengths and weaknesses. And while we do that, you'll be looking at my personal Madden ratings from my custom roster. So yes, you are looking at a video game, but these ratings are an accurate representation of how I perceive each player, and it is really an efficient graphic to use because the NFL is like an angry grandpa and I can't use film for copyright reasons, or they'll demonetize all my videos, which is not an option. So after we go through the roster, we're going to go through the schedule, and then we'll wrap up by looking at their Vegas odds, the team win totals for the year, if I'm going over under for that team, and then also talk about maybe would I bet on this team to win the division at their odds, or would I bet on this team to win the Super Bowl at their odds. But anyway, let's have some fun and get into it. Please, a quick reminder, guys, do like the video if you enjoy, if you learn something. Really is the easiest way to support the channel. Also, if you're shopping for tickets, use promo code FranchiseGuy on SeatGeek. You'll save $20 on your first purchase. So without further ado, we have the Miami Dolphins here coming in as the last team in my 2019 power rankings. But before we talk about how bad I think they are, I do need to clarify that I actually love the direction that this team is taking. Last year, we ranked them as the 30th team. Finn's faithful lost their when I questioned how they hadn't moved on from Ryan Tannehill, and I didn't really see them having any chance of making the playoffs as long as they stuck with him. And well, here we are, and it's time for a new era. And I really do believe in the way that this team is building. They're not overspending on free agents. They're trying to clear out some of these bad contracts that they have on the roster, and they're really kind of starting fresh, allowing Brian Flores to implement that New England, Bill Belichick kind of system in terms of team building and actual schematics, if you want to talk X's and O's, very similar to what the Lions have done with Matt Patricia. So this team really had kind of put itself in position to, you never want to say tank because everyone's trying to win from a coaching and playing perspective, but from a front office point of view, they were prepared to really, take a year off in a way, get a high draft pick, and then maybe look at a quarterback next year. But they were too fortunate, and the opportunity to go and get Josh Rosen after trading away or trading for a future second round pick to get Josh Rosen for a late second round pick who frankly would be a number 1 pick in a lot of drafts, gives them a cheap dart throw at a potential franchise quarterback, and they're going to have this whole season to figure out if he's going to be the guy or if maybe someone in next year's class is going to be that guy. But I loved that move, even though I didn't want them to go for a quarterback this year because they don't have the best surrounding core. The way they were able to get Josh Rosen, you really just have to applaud them for that. And we'll talk about kind of who Josh Rosen is and what I expect in just a second. But at the end of the day, while I don't expect this team to win a ton of games this year, I do think they are going in the right direction. They are going to be a competitive team just like they've been. But for the first time in a few years, I feel like this team actually has some direction, which I really want to applaud this team for, because I've not been very kind to the Dolphins over the last few years. And for the first time, I can really say that I agree with the direction that they're going, even if it doesn't result in a lot of wins this season. So let's break down this roster, starting with the quarterback position. And they're going to rank 28th here. They definitely would have ranked dead last if they did not go and get Josh Rosen. So I love that move. I think there's no doubt that he will start week 1. Some people think it's going to be Fitzpatrick. I don't see how they could do that. You've got a 16 or I guess 17-week tryout here for Josh Rosen before you probably pick in the top 3 or 4 next year and have to make a decision on if it's going to be Tua or Jake Fromm or maybe Jacob Eason emerges or whoever it may be. The thing I like the most about this move is it's similar to like when the Browns took DeShone Kizer or when the Panthers took Jimmy Clausen in the second round. It gave them a cheaper shot at a high upside franchise quarterback, but after a year they decided, you know what, we've got a first round pick now because our quarterback wasn't any good, and we can now use the first overall pick on a Cam Newton, on a Baker Mayfield. That very well could be worst case scenario here with the Josh Rosen deal. But best case scenario is you're getting a guy who still has upside higher than potentially any quarterback that comes out next year. Rosen's got the arm you look for. He is essentially Jared Goff coming off that rookie year. He really didn't do anything in Arizona that you didn't expect when you put him in that garbage situation. Now the problem is the situation any better here? You've got a defensive coach, you've got a crappy offensive line that we'll get to, the receivers are kind of Rosen's still kind of got the odds against him for him to be good here, but he's got a chance to show enough here for this team to maybe even still have a top 5 pick and use that on an elite, maybe offensive player or defensive player and still have that franchise quarterback. So really excited to actually see how he works out in a new situation. But this definitely is kind of his last crack here as a surefire starter. And then you do have Fitzpatrick there. I don't see any reason to put him in unless Josh Rosen gets hurt or is just, god-awful. But I feel like we kind of know what Rosen is. I don't see him being horrendously bad. And then you don't really have anyone behind them to talk about. I don't think there's a whole lot of Jake Rudock truthers out there. They're going to be mad that I don't talk about him. So then we've got the running back room. I've never been a huge Kenyon Drake fan. He's all right, pretty balanced, good vision, not uber powerful, not super explosive, but definitely a good straight line runner. He's okay. I think he's a guy that you kind of just let play out his rookie contract and then probably let go, kind of like a Tevin Coleman, that low end starting running back. He should be more or less the feature guy here. I do really like Kalen Ballage, though. I liked him coming out. He's got that true power. He has almost as much straight line speed, you could argue, as Kenyon Drake. He was also really good at catching the ball in college. So do we see Ballage kind of stand out in camp and kind of make this coaching staff have a change of the guard here? Because I do think he's got more elite traits than Kenyon Drake. Definitely a battle to keep an eye on, especially if this team's losing games and they know they're going to let Kenyon Drake go in free agency. Let's see, he was drafted in 16, so 16, 17, 18, 19. This is the last year of his deal. We could certainly see Kalen Ballage come in here in the second half of the season, and I would be intrigued by that because I think he's a really good running back. Went in the 4th round of an insanely deep class. And then they also draft Myles Gaskin here out of Washington in the 7th round. Now, talk about not having elite traits. Drake and Balaj have plus traits. Gaskins doesn't really have anything that pops out to you, but a smooth receiver, smart player, going to take care of the football, going to play on special teams, but I don't see him really as a threat to Balaj or Drake. He might get involved as a third down back if Kenyon Drake were injured. That's about it. Then you got Kenneth Farrow, kind of a journeyman swing halfback. They did pick up Mark Walton. That surprised me. I didn't think he was any good to begin with, but he got arrested for like the third time. I'd be pretty surprised if he made the team. And then they've got something called a Patrick Laird there. Don't know anything about that. They also drafted a fullback here, Chandler Cox, in the 7th round. They've got Chad O'Shea coming over from New England. They are literally replicating what they had in New England schematically. And down the stretch, New England used the fullback more than anyone in the NFL. So maybe Chandler Cox can actually get on the field as a fullback, which is a rarity in the NFL these days. So then we've got the wide receiver room, and this includes tight ends. But really, at the top, you got Kenny Stills. He's fine, kind of a deep threat, poor man's Deshaun Jackson, has some drop issues. You got Albert Wilson, who actually was stunningly good last year. He's definitely what you get the most excited about here in terms of the short passing, catch and run ability there with Josh Rosen. I thought they totally overpaid for him. Thought he was a role player for Kansas City, but he actually came in and was a pretty dominant, kind of slot weapon for this team. And in this New England quick-hitting passing game, I think Wilson could have an even better year this year. So he could be a, kind of a fantasy late-round guy. I don't know when he is going, but he could definitely exceed expectations this year. Was definitely under the radar as a good performer last year. Then Devante Parker comes back, I believe, on a 1-year deal. We're not going to talk about Devante Parker. It's believe it when I see it with him. It's all about effort for Devante Parker. He's got the physical talent, former first-round pick. Then you got Bryce Butler, journeyman. Isaiah Ford, can he get on the field? Kind of a big-bodied, intriguing guy out of Virginia Tech a couple years ago. You do have Jakeem Grant. He's another guy that's kind of a specialist, but did actually show some things as a receiver. They pick up Ricardo Lewis. And then Preston Williams, an intriguing guy to keep an eye on here. Can he make the team? He was one of my kind of sleeper prospect primers that we talked about. Really a freak athlete. Did not test well, but his tape is incredible, and he has some kind of domestic violence history in college with his girlfriend in a dorm room. He seems to be behind him, but he fell out of the draft, a guy that potentially could have been a 3rd or 4th round pick. His tape reminds me a lot of Kenny Golladay. If he makes this team, look for him to maybe be a replacement for what they thought they had in Devante Parker as that big-bodied, almost number 1 wide receiver. So he's definitely intriguing, but that's really all this wide receiver core is kind of a mishmash of intriguing options. You don't have that true number 1. And then at tight end, you got Mike Gesicki. He's a truly freak athlete. I'm not a big fan of him. He can definitely develop as a wide receiver, but he's also kind of a, believe it when you see it kind of guy. He does not block at all. Did not have a very good rookie debut. They bring in Dwayne Allen, a blocking specialist. Nick O'Leary, again, really good blocker. Durham Smythe. Those 3 are really good blockers, but aren't going to offer a whole lot. They got a journeyman in Clive Walford there. So it's actually a pretty deep tight end room. Just no one is really, honestly, like a starter that you're afraid of at all. So overall, the wide receivers are going to come in 27th. I like the depth. That just, there isn't anyone that really stands out to you. But I am intrigued to see how they're going to use all these different pieces. Then you have the offensive line, and this is what really drags this team down. You do have a good franchise left tackle in Laramie Tunsil. They're going to have to pay him this year. But you let your right tackle go, Jawan James, replacing him with Jordan Mills, Isaiah Prince. Not ideal. You got huge questions at guard. I would expect Michael Dieter to start. That was a pick that I actually really liked. But then you got Isaac Asiata, Chris Reed, Jesse Davis. No one you're excited about starting at guard. And then you got a big problem at center as well. Daniel Kilgore, not the best. Let's just leave it at that. So I actually do think this is the worst offensive line in the NFL, and this is what gives you kind of pause on if Josh Rosen can be good, because he definitely, is like a Jared Goff, Matt Ryan type, who has the arm, has the kind of processor and accuracy to be a franchise quarterback, but you have got to give him time to throw because he doesn't have the best pocket manipulation or mobility. So maybe they can get rid of the ball quick enough with all of these different weapons and this option, quick-hitting pass offense that we've grown accustomed to in New England. I've kind of got my doubts on if that's going to work out. So the offensive line, definitely a big concern here. It is also a big reason, I think, why the Dolphins come in at 32, because I do kind of like their depth with their skill players, and their defense, it's young, but they actually have some decent pieces on the defense. But this offensive line, it's going to be really hard for Miami to have consistency in 2019. So the offense as a whole is going to come in as the 32nd group in the NFL, the worst offense in the league. And really the only way that's going to get elevated is, really two options, I guess, is if Josh Rosen can be that franchise quarterback you're looking for. It could certainly make them not the worst offense in the league. But also, if you can get guys like Isaiah Prince and Michael Dieter, who were, two really good draft picks on the offensive line, to be starting caliber guys as rookies, that would certainly help. Because, like I said, I don't hate the rest of the skill players there, or Josh Rosen for that matter. So then we flip over to the defensive side of the ball. I mentioned they kind of got some intriguing pieces here, definitely holes as well. So let's start with the run defense. This includes the interior defensive line, really the entire defense, but that interior defensive line is going to be the heart of the run defense. This can be boosted by good linebackers, good edge run defenders, or even a really good, secondary player. Who's good against the run, like a Minka Fitzpatrick or TJ McDonald. It all plays in here, but the core of this is going to be that interior front. So you've got Davin Godchaux, good young player, really took a step up last year. I see him as a solid starting number 2 defensive tackle. They draft Christian Wilkins in the first round. I did not like that pick, as was evident in my draft grades. I like Christian Wilkins, the player, but 12th overall, that was very early for a guy who I also see as kind of a number 2 starting defensive tackle. A guy that's never going to really have the tools to be an elite pass rusher. And to take that guy at 12, it's similar to when the Bucs took Vita Vea for me. It's just not worth it. Now, he is going to start and be a very good NFL player, so it's hard to say it was a terrible pick, but you do got to think about the value there. I did not love that, but you do have a bit of an identity now with those two guys. You got Kendrick Norton, a young player out of Miami who started to kind of rotate in late last year. You still got Akeem Spence from Detroit, Vincent Taylor, a good player for rotational depth there, Jamarius Pittman, undrafted rookie last year, got some good playing time. So they've got some decent depth here. They're going to be okay against the run. You don't really have that elite force. And I don't know if Godchaux or Wilkins are ever going to be that, but you definitely got some questions on the edge about who's going to be a good run defender. Not that you're really asking that out of those positions anyway, but they're not really standing out like a Calais Campbell or a Olivier Vernon and being an impactful edge run defender, And we'll talk about the linebackers and the safeties as we go here. But just an okay run defense, tied for 26th. And then you look at this pass rush. Just like we said about the offensive line, this is what's really dragging this team down. They definitely went kind of rebuild mode in terms of this roster for this year, and that is evident in this position specifically. Not addressed in the draft. They lost arguably their top 3 pass rushers from last season, William Hayes, Cameron Wake, and Robert Quinn, all gone and not replaced. So you're asking Charles Harris to step up. Now he's finally going to get that opportunity. I've criticized this team of signing or trading for Robert Quinn and William Hayes and not letting Charles Harris get those reps. So he's going to finally get a chance to prove himself. It's almost like his rookie year in a way, but he also has not really played well when he's been on the field or earned reps to take away from those veteran guys. So you don't really know what you're getting there from Charles Harris. And then there's another big drop off after him. You got Jonathan Woodyard. Tank Carradine, Jonathan Ledbetter. Like, it's the worst group of edge defenders in the league, and at some point you got to get after the quarterback, and that's going to be a big problem for this defense. I like the rest of this defense, but pass rush is really important, and they don't have one. And, like I said, you're not really getting it from Christian Wilkins or Davin Godchaux, too much either. They're fine, but they're not going to be, Grady Jarrett or Geno Atkins, with consistent pressure up the middle. So the pass rush definitely dragging this team down, and I think is going to be a pretty big liability against some of the better quarterbacks in this league, because they're going to have all day to throw, and these defensive backs that are pretty good are going to get exposed at times because you can't cover for 5 or 6 seconds. So then you got the linebacker group here. This is actually a pretty good group of linebackers. I ranked them 12th. Jerome Baker had a fantastic rookie season. He was right behind those really top 3 rookie linebackers. This was one of the better linebacker classes in recent memory. Definitely undersized, not much of a thumper, but his coverage ability out of the linebacker position is desirable, to say the least. Then you got a little bit of a bigger body there, Raekwon McMillan, a second-round pick, also out of Ohio State from the year before. He came on a little bit last year, so between them, I love that duo. And then Kiko Alonso can still play, especially in base packages, which you're not running base too much these days, but when he's out there, he's a really good third linebacker. Let's see, they drafted Andrew Van Ginkel, kind of a flexible guy. He's a good example of that Belichickian linebacker who can maybe line up on the edge occasionally in like a 4-3 odd package, can cover, thump, but really not elite at anything. And then you got Chase Allen, Mike Hill, Quentin Poling, some good athletes. It's a good linebacker room, and I think Raekwon McMillan and Jerome Baker are going to take another step up this year. I think we're projecting a little bit of that here with this 12th ranking. And then with the defensive backs here, they just gave Xavier Howard a mega contract. I've been a little critical of Xavier Howard. I'm coming around on him a little bit. He's a good top 20 corner or so. He's a little bit to me like a Xavier Rhodes. He's got that ideal length, and against certain matchups, against maybe receivers that aren't as quick but have better size and length, like an Alshon Jeffrey, Mike Evans, he's going to be really good in those matchups. But you put him up against an Odell Beckham, Antonio Brown, one of those kind of guys, a T.Y. Hilton, Amari Cooper, I think you can see some struggles with him. He can get a little grabby, and I think that's where you see the inconsistency in his PFF grades that drag him down. But he does have really dominant games at times as well. So was he worth the contract? Hard to say no. It's not like Miami has to pay anyone anyway, and they're at a point where when you do have a good second round pick develop into a borderline star player, you definitely want to pay him. For most teams, that contract would be too much in my opinion, but I do think you had to pay him and start keeping your talent here. Then you got Bobby McCain, undersized corner, but really good at kind of complementing Xavier Howard and covering those shorter, quicker guys, a lot of times out of the slot. They signed Eric Rowe. Brian Flores, obviously familiar with him. He's had his ups and downs in New England, but he might start here in some respect. This secondary does get a little complicated because you got Minkah Fitzpatrick there, and it's hard to kind of put a position on him. He's kind of a slot corner, strong safety. All the Dolphins fans keep saying he's switching full-time to safety this year. I don't think so. I think he's going to maybe be officially listed as a safety now with a new coach here and a new scheme, but I think he's still going to play a lot of strong safety, nickel corner. There's really not a huge difference between those positions, depending on the scheme. And you got TJ McDonald and Rashad Jones there. So really those 5 guys we talked about there, the 3 safeties, Xavier Howard and Bobby McCain, you've got a lot of flexibility. They do kind of lack that true free safety. Rashad Jones can play it, TJ McDonald can play it, but they kind of lack that range. Minkah's never really emerged as that rangy center fielder type. He's been more of a box defensive back, though I think he has the potential to be more of a rangy guy because he is a fast player. But I like this secondary between those 5. They come in ranked 15th in the league. I wish they had a better pass rush to kind of help them really emerge and develop together, I do think they're going to struggle at times because they're just going to have to cover for so long. The depth here is a little concerning. Cordray Tankersley, I've never been a fan of him. I don't see him emerging in his third year. Torrey McTyler, Cornell Armstrong, Marquise Smith, Jalen Davis, Walt Aikens. No one really catches your eye there. One note on Jamar Summers, who they just recently signed. He was one of my sleeper players in the 2018 class. His tape reminded me a lot of Malcolm Butler. Now, he's actually listed right now as a safety, so that's intriguing. He's a physical player with good ball skills. He could work out as a safety. He absolutely killed it in the AAF. So someone to keep an eye on there if he can make the team, Jamar Summers out of UConn. And that's going to wrap up our look at this defensive roster. So they'll come in here 29th defensively. That pass rush really dragging this team down. If Charles Harris can emerge even as a number 2 pass rusher, because right now we don't even know if he's a starting caliber pass rusher. If you can at least get something from him, this defense has proved to have some nice players. You've got a defensive coach here. They could definitely, perform past that ranking there of 29th. But that's a pretty big if, because that pass rush, while we've actually flipped it and put more of a priority on coverage than pass rush, that doesn't mean that a pass rush isn't important. And I think Miami, kind of by a landslide, has the worst pass rush in the league. So I definitely think they have the pieces to, turn this thing into a good defense, maybe 2 or 3 years down the road. They've got some really nice players. I just don't think it's going to happen this year. And then for coaching culture, I rank them 21st. This Miami team, granted, it was always under Adam Gase, but I don't know why that would really change necessarily. They've kind of had this scrappy personality to them, which I really appreciate. They've never been the most eye-popping roster, but they do find ways to win games that they shouldn't. And I think a lot of that is going to translate and maybe even improve here with the new coaching staff. And I kind of believe in Brian Flores, who has learned there under Bill Belichick. And I think you could do a lot worse in terms of coaching culture for the Dolphins. So the last thing we got to do here is take a look at this schedule. The over-under for this team is 5 wins. They are the last team in terms of Vegas as well. So we are in agreement with Vegas with the Dolphins at 32. But I've actually got them starting 0-4 here. They've got to play Baltimore and New England to start the year. Those are going to be tough challenges for Josh Rosen at home. And then you go to Dallas. That's a really tough game. After that, you got to take on Phillip Rivers and the Chargers. That nasty pass rush against this offensive line, probably not going to fare too well. And then another home game. So they start 4 out of 5 in that hot Miami Heat. That's unfortunate. You would think they'd rather play their home games later in the year. You got to play the Redskins. I did give them that win, but that's definitely a question mark. Redskins are a nasty team. Then you got to go to Buffalo, got to go to Pittsburgh, 2 of the hardest places to play in the NFL in terms of home field. You got the Jets at home. I did give them that win. So starting 2-6, not looking good, but they're going to have to keep on trucking. At Indianapolis, that's a tough game. I gave them a win at home against Buffalo. At Cleveland, we know the Browns are going to be tough, and then the Eagles there, another loss. At the Jets, at the Giants, really tough stretch there for the second half of the year. And then you got the Bengals at home. I gave them that win, and then you got to finish up at New England. So for an AFC East team, certainly not the easiest of schedules. Having road games like at Dallas, at Pittsburgh, at the Colts, you got to play the Eagles. Definitely not a good draw for an AFC East team. So I've got them at 4-12 right now, which is going to come in under the 5-win Vegas prediction there. Win range of 2-5 with 3 of those games being question marks. Would I take this bet? Sure. Like I said, the Dolphins have found ways to win games that they shouldn't. And that could certainly continue. If they won 6 or 7 games this year, I wouldn't really be that surprised. Just, looking at their team on paper, the direction this team is going, I do project them to be the worst team in the NFL next year. But all that said, I think I've clarified that I really like the direction of this team with Tom Brady getting older. I think they're putting themselves in a much better position to 2 or 3 years from now be able to compete with, I think, the Jets and the Bills, and if Bill Belichick is still in New England, the Patriots after Tom Brady. Because if they would have stuck with Ryan Tannehill and the kind of direction they had been going, this would be a clear-cut 32, or maybe they would have spent more money on bad free agency contracts that were just going to cripple them further down the road. So I like the direction of this team, but they do come in at number 32. So that's going to do it for our first deep dive. Again, guys, please like the video. Probably not going to have number 31 revealed until next week. I'm heading down to Chicago for the weekend, but really looking forward to that. Cheers as always, guys, and we'll see you next time. Peace out.